Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today is Monday, November 4th, 2024. This is our mostly weekly Community Planning Infrastructure and Resources work session. We have a few items on the agenda. We are going to switch the order a little bit, and we'll ask Leslie to explain that. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners at this time, joined by my colleagues, Kristen Stevens and Jody Shattuck McNally, and Lorinda Volker just joined us, our county manager. So at this time, Leslie, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Leslie Ellis, Community Planning Infrastructure and Resources Director. And as you noted, we we have two major items on our agenda today. One is to get an update from our Road and Bridge Department, and the other is an update on conservation easements and other matters from natural resources. And there are a few other topics that Dalen and his team would like to cover. Rebecca, I know, has a brief update for you also. So we'll start with Road and Bridge because I think this will be fairly short. The purpose of this today is just informational. It's not often that you get a chance to hear from Todd Jurgens and his team because they're always so busy out in the field taking care of our roads and bridges and doing the great work that they do. But we thought that with the transition now from the fall and summer season into winter, that it would be a good time to just report out on some of the work that's been done and then where we're headed into the snow season and how they work. So Todd has a brief presentation. He'll introduce Rick and Justin and JC too when he gets going. But really the purpose is just to share some information and then answer any questions that you may have. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Todd.
Welcome, Todd and colleagues.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Todd Jurgens, the Road and Bridge Director. To my left here is Rick Johnson. He's our Paved Roads Manager. And then Justin Hirsch, the Assistant Road and Bridge Director. And on the far end, JC Van Cleve, who is a Functional Group Manager over our hauling team and safety-related items. So we're just thought it'd be a good opportunity to get a few of our group managers in and introduce them to you. As we come in front of you at work sessions, we'll try to roll different people in and so you can put names with faces, and I'm sure you see some of that on emails. Leslie said we had two major items on the agenda. I'm not sure ours is a major item, but it just kind of a quick update on where we're at year to date for 2024. And like Leslie said, as we're transitioning into our fall and winter schedule. This first slide is just a maintenance activity calendar. It's actually on the Road and Bridge webpage, and it just is a high-level indication of the different types of work that we're performing at different times through the year. So on the far right, that area that's highlighted in blue is kind of where we're at right now, and we're transitioning into that fall and winter work. I'll cover that a little bit more, some of those items in a minute, but just facts and figures for 2024 year to date. Picked just some of the major work activities that we've got going on in the department. To date, we've graded 1,079 centerline miles of non-paved road. And so obviously that's more miles than we have total. But what that means is that each road in the system's been graded average of 2.67 times. That's right where we should be this year. At this point in the year, we've done our spring grading coming out of the winter, done our full grading and treatment program through the summer, and we're just now wrapping up that second full grading and treating operation. So it's a lot of miles of road to cover with the 7 crews that we've got. To date, we've hauled 45,700 tons of construction material with our truck fleet. So that's aggregate to non-paved roads as we re-gravel. That's chip seal aggregate to the chip seal project. That's salt and sand for our winter operations. But that equates to about 3,500 truckloads of material that's been hauled to date this year. Our chip seal project this year was 36 centerline miles. That included 29 miles of subdivision, or excuse me, mainline road, and about 7 miles of subdivision road. So that project is complete for the year. We did 4 miles of microsurfacing, which is a new product for us. Some of you may know it as slurry seal. CDOT spec is microsurfacing. That's not a product that we've used much in the past, and we had a section on County Road 27, excuse me, that structurally the road is in good shape. It had 3 chip seals on it, and what we were seeing was that chip seal aggregates start to push down into the underlying layers and what we call flush out, where you're seeing the black strips down the wheel paths as that oil comes to the surface, and that causes us issues with traction on the road. Typically, our method of remedying that has been an asphalt overlay. This is somewhat of a test section for us. We're doing it at about the 10th the cost of an overlay. And the hope is that microsurfacing creates a harder, more durable layer on top of that chip that'll allow us then to put another chip seal on and extend the life of that road before it needs an actual overlay. So that we'll be watching that stretch of County Road 27 and seeing how that performs. We did complete 8 miles of asphalt overlay this summer. That project's complete as well. As we move into fall here, that has just wrapped up within the last 3 weeks. Culverts, we've cleaned and flushed 12,000 feet of culvert in the county. That we have a flush truck, back truck, a crew that's dedicated to keeping those culverts around the county open. 169,000 lineal feet of roadside ditch has been cleaned and graded, so that's roughly 32 miles of roadside ditch. 381 center line miles of pavement restriped and repainted. 268 lane miles of road shoulders, paved road shoulders have been maintained, and that's both grading existing material along the road and then adding new material where necessary. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the hiring. That's been something that has been a pretty busy activity at Road and Bridge for a number of years right now. But to date, we've brought 12 new FTE positions. They're not new positions. We've filled 12 vacant FTE positions this year and 12 additional temp positions. Those 12 FTEs, it's about 17% of our operator staff is brand new this year. So a lot of training is going on. JC's involved in overseeing our training program, but we have a lot of new folks. So like I said, 17% of them new within the year. I think 50% roughly new within the last 5 years. So Justin spends a lot of his time managing that hiring process and has kept us really busy for a number of years. But again, those are all numbers year to date in '24. As we transition into winter, we just finished our what we call our snow day training. That's a 2-day event that's held in October each year. The first day of that is really a classroom type setting. We cover policy, we cover procedure, safety, materials, and then equipment overview. That second day is at the snow shops where we're loading and testing all the plows and spreaders. Make sure that all the equipment is stocked with the appurtenances that it needs, chains, tow straps, clevises, route books, that sort of stuff. It's really just an opportunity for us to educate one new staff. So we talked about 12 brand new people, their first time through it. But it's really about switching gears and starting to think about winter. We've just spent, 7 months in our summer season, and it's an opportunity to get everybody kind of to switch gears and start thinking about the winter that's coming and make sure that we're ready. We've had plows out twice now, I believe. And we had plows out this weekend up in the foothills. It did snow in Red Feather and Stove Prairie, so it's here. Soon enough, it'll be down here. But that's what that snow day training is really centered around. And then again, back to that calendar, but switching to colder weather operations like crack sealing, pothole patching, paved road shouldering. So we talked about the miles of roads that have been shouldered. That work occurs in the spring and the fall when we're not grading road. It's the same crews that are typically grading non-paved roads. Once we're complete with that operation in the fall, then we switch to shouldering the paved roads. Regraveling of non-paved roads, and then obviously snow and ice control. I just had a parentheses there. We're averaging about 20,000 man hours each year performing snow and ice control activities. So I wanted to highlight a couple engineered improvement projects that Road and Bridge is either completed or is in the process of completing. So County Road 62 between County Road 3 and 1, so that's east of Wellington. We had a section of road out there that had a history of washing out during heavy rain events. Some steeper grades coming from the east, west, and then the cross culvert at the bottom of the hill had just over the years of sediment deposition in the bottom. That culvert was really daylight and below grade, causing us a lot of issues and a lot of maintenance. So we worked with the engineering department. They produced a new centerline profile. We raised that road about 2 feet, which allowed us to bring the culvert up and get it above the deposited sediment. We widened the ditches from just a shallow V ditch to a ditch with a 4-foot flat bottom to increase the capacity. There's a couple pictures. So that picture on the left was really it was after an event in 2023. We lost a section of that road, and then the picture on the right is the completed project. I say complete, it's complete minus the seeding that needs to occur this fall. So the ability of the department to do these kinds of projects in-house versus sending those to contractors is really a win for everybody. They're projects that are good for our folks to hone their skills, building engineered projects, and certainly a savings to the taxpayer. We have the equipment and the capability with our staff to go do this kind of work. The other project that it was an engineered project is County Road 56. So this is out off of 287 north of LaPorte. We've got a bridge in there. It's a timber superstructure. It sits on a concrete abutment on the north side and a stone masonry abutment on the south side. It had a sufficiency rating of 33.5 and an overall condition of poor. The structure needed to be replaced. So again, we worked with the engineering department, Morgan Fay, the bridge engineer. An aluminum box culvert was selected as the structure to replace this bridge. Worked with the ditch company to get approvals from them. CDOT owns the property adjacent. So we're actually moving the location. The old bridge is going to stay in place through construction, and we're moving the new structure just downstream. So we're working with CDOT to get the right-of-way squared away there for the new structure. But a couple pictures. So I don't know, it shows up better on my computer, but I don't know if you can see, this is that stone masonry abutment. It's got a fairly wicked lean to it. It wasn't designed that way. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Timber superstructure and then a concrete abutment on the north side. So that's the structure we're replacing. And just a few pictures is the ditch just downstream of the bridge before we started. This is during excavation. And then the concrete footing forms are in place here. They're being poured here. And finally, this is what it looks like as of Thursday of last week. So that structure is starting to bolt together. And again, this is work being completed in-house by road and bridge crews at what will be a significant savings to the taxpayer. We have the ability in-house to do this kind of work, and so we're kind of proud of that work. We thought we'd highlight that.
Thank you.
So that was my quick,
Okay.
and then any questions?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Todd. Commissioner Shaddock McNally.
Well done. Thank you. And first, let me say thank you to your whole team and the crews. As a resident of Larimer County who's had a lot of work done around her house this last year, just stellar work, fantastic. Employees were great and wonderful, and it's just still working fantastic and great, and just I had a couple of different projects, so just want to say well done. Fantastic looking at all the miles and all the work you do. And knowing it's 2.67 times that you graded, my first question is, doing that 2.67 times, and it makes sense after winter and getting ready for winter, is that a best practice industry standard, or and how many miles of road do you? I think I know the answer to this, but just for the publics, how much do we have to maintain to do that 2.67 times, or is this above the industry standard, or what does that look like?
Well, we've right at 404 miles of non-paved mainline county road. I'm not, I'm not sure there is an industry standard. It really depends on the material that the roads are comprised of and surfaced with. It depends on weather, traffic volumes, horizontal and vertical alignment on the roads, and then whether entities are using dust suppressant stabilizing agent like we do in Larimer County. So that's pretty typical for us in Larimer County. We talk to folks, I'm thinking of Morgan County right now. They've got some roads that they grade every day. They have really low quality surfacing material. These are roads that are in front of some fairly busy dairy operations, a lot of truck traffic, and every day there's a grader on that road. So where we're hitting it twice in a year, they're hitting it, 200 plus times a year. And so, not trying to be evasive, but I'm not sure there is an industry standard. Every entity is different. I think we're all trying to accomplish the same goal, which is to keep the roads in good shape. We just go about it in different ways. So with our crews and the way we are equipped and staffed, the way we maintain roads makes sense for Larimer County.
Well, having traveled up to the northwest corner, like I try to do at least once a year, I'm just always impressed with how great shape those roads are up there. I know we don't pave them like Wyoming does, but they're really in great shape, and so it's always been very impressed. My second question, if I can, Mr. Chair, is, and I don't know how long ago we changed the hours or the shifts, and the signs are up by my house with the snow plowing and things like that, and I'm just curious how, we haven't had a lot, thank goodness. I was watching some videos of I-70 and the Vail Pass, and some of that looked a little treacherous yesterday. So I'm just thinking, we should always be prepared, and I'm wondering how that's working when we've had to plow. I know it hadn't had a lot of plowing days, but how is that working with the new system and hours, and how do the employees and staff feel about it?
So this will be the third winter, the second winter where we've been able to fully implement the split shift scenario. And maybe I'll let Justin address kind of how that's working.
So Justin Hirsch, Assistant Road and Bridge Director. Thus far, it's actually working very well. The feedback from employees has been great. We've shortened their shifts up quite a bit. We went from a 15-hour shift to 8.5-hour shifts for most of our folks. So that's been great. A lot safer. In the storms that we have had, you're correct. We've had fewer events, it seems, especially last winter, fewer events than normal. The shifting has worked well for us. We have, with our staffing woes, as you'll remember, when we kind of laid this on the table and wanted to change to this shifting, that was a concern of ours. We have just enough staffing to staff both shifts completely. And when you combine that with sick leave and or injury leave, it can be tight some storms. That being said, it has worked fairly well. It's been obvious that we're giving a higher level of service to most of our roads, in that we are on them longer throughout the day, 4 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. So we feel like we're getting folks through the rush hours and are on the roads when we have the most traffic on the roads. So we have not received any negative feedback that I know of from the public so far, and seem to be checking the boxes, if you will. Seems to be working.
That's great. I have received a little bit, but it's not been a lot. It's just mostly up by Carr Lake area and things, and it's usually the parents who are worried about their kids driving back from school and things, but it's just been little, and I've addressed it, so, and I'm not saying that, just so you know, I've gotten a little, but it's not been tremendous. So I'm just curious, because I know we did this for some really good reasons, but it sounds like we're still bringing the same level of service and making it a good conditions for employees, so that's important. So, thank you, I appreciate the answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens, questions or comments?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the work that you do. Obviously, really important and really impressive with some of those numbers. We had an issue on one of the roads with one of our, I guess, contracted folks that we had talked about at one point. It got resolved, but thank you for helping me resolve those issues, because it was very strange. Somebody taped my name and phone number to signs
yes.
and said, "Call your commissioner if you don't like what's happening," and they sure did. But I'm glad that was resolved. So thank you for your help getting through that. And then just a couple questions. So with the new FTEs, are you finding people that are pretty new in their career that are doing this? Are they kind of just got their CDL kind of situation? Or are they coming from different entities? Or what are you finding with the new hires?
I'm gonna let Justin, because that's his life.
That's a really good question. I would say that we are probably a 70-30 split, as 70% new employees, career change, or very early in their stages in this career. 30% well experienced within this type of career, this industry, or like industry. It's been somewhat trying, but there's some benefit to that as well. As Todd mentioned earlier, we do quite a bit of training. JC is heavily involved with that. We spend a lot of times with folks. We have some unique opportunities as far as an employee, from day one, they're able to apply for different positions within the department, different entry-level positions within the department. And so there's a bit of windshield training and on-the-job training that happens as well. But it has been trying. And I feel like we are working through that very well. It's, as Todd mentioned earlier, it's taken quite a bit of time. It's something that 10 years ago we did not have to spend this much time and this much effort towards this. So once we walked past that that discomfort, if you will, we've been working through it very well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I suppose when somebody's really brand new, there's a lot of training that has to be done.
There is.
But I guess one of the good things is they're trained in the way you want things done. Right?
Sure, there's some benefit to come with.
Absolutely. Something that we, we'll make the statement, we're able to roll our own. We're able to mold our own employees in our operation with our equipment and our procedures and policies. So that's been very helpful. You had mentioned CDLs earlier. We've been lucky enough to have received good word from a few different or outreach from a few different schools in the area. So we seem to have folks with new CDLs come knocking fairly regular, which has been a benefit. And, the discomfort I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I'd call it discomfort. It's a difference for us. We spend a lot of time in trucks with new employees. We use trucks for every operation that we do. If everybody that works for Road and Bridge is going to plow snow, and they're going to do that in a large truck. So we spend a lot of time on CDL, truck training, driving training, but thus far it seems to be paying off.
And do you, are you still looking for folks? I mean, you're just maybe always looking for folks, right? I mean, is it kind of,
Yeah,
I mean,
it
it
feels
sounds
like-
like once you get them trained up, they usually stay, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, if we can get people through their probationary period and I think we've had fairly good luck with folks staying. When you have that many employees, we have, turnover without a doubt. I think right now there's 5 vacant positions. And, what Justin was talking about, we have operator positions that start at apprentice operator, journey, senior, master, and then team leader. When we open, for instance, a master operator position, that will generally fill from within. So we start with one open position and we fill it with someone, an existing employee. Now that position is open, and we may chase that one position through 3 or 4 hires before we ultimately fill it with an apprentice or journey operator that was an outside hire. That creates a lot of work, but it also creates a lot of opportunity for employees and gives them the ability to promote from within, and we think that is the best policy. So, like I said, one vacancy will create 3 or 4 hires that Justin and the manager team will work through. So when you have 5 vacancies, when you multiply that, they're going to go through, 15 hires before, interview processes and hiring processes before those are all full. And by the time those are all full, there'll be another vacancy. So
And so.
We really pride ourselves on the competitive nature of our hiring process, in that there are no givens. So as Todd mentioned, any vacancy that is not a entry-level position is open internal only first, and we perform practical testing for each of those level of operators, as well as interviews. So it takes quite a bit of time, quite a bit of wherewithal, but we really feel it is the best practice.
Yeah, I think it's great for people to see their career progression. Like, I'm going to start out, but then I could get up to this level and make more money and have more responsibility. And so that's great. Well, thank you very much. I just appreciate the work so much. I hope the engineering kind of work is fun to do something maybe different too. I mean, is it fun to, I mean, because some of the work can be probably the same, but is it fun to have different projects like that? Because that's pretty cool that you can do that in-house.
yeah, I think, everybody involved enjoys the work. It's a break from the routine that we're doing every day throughout the year. And it also stretches us and makes us grow a little bit. And if we don't ever do those sort of projects, then we can't when we absolutely have to. So it keeps our skills honed, and we own the equipment and have the knowledge on staff to be able to do those projects. And so it's nice to see us utilize that.
Great. Well, thanks for all your work, and thanks to your whole team. We're grateful for the work. It's hard work, but we really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I also want to express my appreciation to you all for the good work. I do have a couple of questions. One of them is another angle on the question that Commissioner Stevens asked about staffing. And I'm curious, Justin, in terms of those 12 FTEs and where you recruit from, is it local folks, is it regional folks, or is it from everywhere? And does the cost of housing affordability, ever come up in those conversations?
Very good question. You're absolutely right. It does come up. I think that the best answer would be that folks are coming in from everywhere. It's actually becoming a little bit more rare that we see Larimer County natives, or residents rather, applying for our positions. We have quite a few folks from the region, however. There are, we've hired quite a few of out-of-state folks. That seems to be a constant. We, and I can't give you, I wouldn't want to give you a number as far as percentage from either, but we are seeing folks from everywhere. Something that is talked about, it's a topic of regular discussion around our camps is the cost of living within Larimer County. We have quite a few folks that live in Wyoming or Weld County.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. And going back to that one slide that you showed all the 2024 activities data, I'm wondering, especially in light of some input that we received recently from one of our longtime farmer residents who lives on County Road 15, I think one of the main takeaways of George's comments, and I know folks have engaged, is that things have changed a lot over the last 50 years in the rural areas, and there's more impact on, especially on unpaved roads and speeding perhaps, and those kinds of things. And so related to that, my question is, how do we evaluate whether or not we need to adjust the scheduling of these kinds of road maintenance things, or perhaps take a different approach? Maybe that's an example as that surfacing thing. But does that make sense, Todd and team? In light of all these changes and more impacts on our rural roads, are we having to adjust, and how do we evaluate, what we do and that sort of thing?
So specific to that situation or just overall?
Well, I think overall, yeah. I think overall.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, as the county's population increases, the impact on the roads is impacted as well. And we see a lot more travel in rural areas than we used to. I think some of that has to do, this is Todd Jurgens' opinion. When COVID hit and folks realized that they could work from home, that gave them the ability to live further from town and yet earn a living. And so there's more traffic with more folks living in the county. We see a lot more home deliveries. So FedEx trucks, Amazon trucks, UPS trucks, the old brick and mortar where we all went to Foothills Fashion Mall, those days are over, and now we jump online and we order what we need and it gets delivered to our home. So we see that impact on the road. I think without a doubt, we've talked about this in the past, our priorities when we budget on an annual basis is to take care of the roads that we have today, and then roll, all the remaining additional funding to capital projects. Capital projects are an area where we are sorely in need of additional funding. Obviously, you're all aware that tomorrow we might get good news. We'll see how the vote on the sales tax measure goes. That would go a long ways towards helping us address some of the capital improvements that need to occur on the system. Taking a gravel road and getting it paved. That we throw out an average cost per mile of $3 million to take a gravel road to paved. The reality of that is that investment will never pay off in a savings in maintenance. I think folks look at that and think, well, you don't have to grade the road 2.67 times a year. That should be a cost savings. But that initial investment is so high that before that's ever paid back, it needs to be rebuilt. And so we don't pave roads to save money. We pave roads to increase the level of service to the public. So Commissioner, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I believe you have, and I appreciate that you made the comment about the ballot measure 1A. I think this discussion provides more rationale for why that, if the voters approve that would be a good investment in our infrastructure. My last question, please, is what is the process, or how user-friendly is the process if folks have identified a particular, issue, and in other words, either to perhaps file a complaint or provide feedback to you all, so you know there's a situation over here and maybe we need to address it. How is that process, and is it user-friendly?
So we can get a hold of us in a lot of different ways. Obviously, pick up the phone and call our main office.
Okay.
They can email the Road and Bridge administration, but most of the feedback comes through our customer citizen portal. That's on the Road and Bridge webpage, and it, at the top of the page says report an issue. You click on report an issue and it takes you into the citizen portal. You tell us where the issue is at, what the issue is, and then based on what that issue is, it gets routed to one of the managers or Justin and I to address. Justin and I see all of them, but if it's a drainage issue, it's going to go to our manager that oversees drainage. If it's a paved road issue, it's going to go to Rick. So it's fairly easy. There is an app that folks can put on their phone. When they go to the citizen portal, we give them information on how to go to the app store and download the app, and it literally gives you the ability to take a picture of the issue and submit it, and it geotags the photo so we know exactly where it's at. So we feel like we're fairly easy to get a hold of in a lot of different formats, and try to be responsive with those issues when they're identified. Try to get back with folks quickly, and they don't always get the answer that they want, but they do get a response back, so.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, colleagues. Brenda, is there anything you'd like to add, or perhaps a question before we move on to our next topic?
I think I'll just say I want to really give this team a lot of credit. So they have a very prescribed program with a limited amount of funds. And to their credit, they stretch those dollars as far as they can. So this idea that we're piloting micro surfacing to see how that works because it's more cost effective. If that works, that may be appropriate for various places throughout the county, certainly not everywhere. But I have every confidence that they're looking at what they're spending, on what they're spending, what new things are out there, what other organizations are doing, and how they're rating these resurfacing options. And so you all are constantly scanning the environment about what can we do better, cheaper, make the most of the money. And I hope the public understands you turn $1 into $1.75 every time you can, and that's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lorinda. Colleagues, thank you very much for your good work and a good discussion. And you two fellows, you're kind of quiet, but you were focusing on your listening skills. Thank you all. Good to see you folks. Shall we move on, Leslie?
Thank you all. Great job.
Interesting, eh?
Okay, we've got the changing of the crew here, so our Department of Natural Resources team is heading up, and we'll start with an update on land conservation, conservation easements as requested at a prior work session and in an email thread. And then Dalen, I believe you have a couple other topics, and Megan and Justin, that you may want to cover today, depending on how much time we have. Oh, that clock's not right at all. So I think, okay.
Yep, but I'm going to quickly turn it over to Megan Flanagan, who has a short presentation on our conservation strategy, mostly around conservation easements. And I'm sorry, I'm Dalen Figgs, Director for Larimer County's Natural Resources. And then we're certainly happy to answer any questions. And if time allows, we'd like to provide a short update on Canyon Edge and the process we're going through there, and Chimney Hollow as well as the planning process. With that, I'll turn it over to Megan and Justin.
Thank you, David.
Okay, great.
To project it up on the screen, whatever that is.
F8, maybe. Okay. Give us just a minute. The projection isn't.
While you're doing that, I'll just make a comment. I thought there was a good article in the Coloradoan regarding the Chimney Hollow Reservoir recreation area.
I agree. We're nearing completion. We'll be bringing our management plan to the Board of County Commissioners at a future meeting. We're going through our boards and commissions at this point for its final adoption, but it is getting close to completion.
Okay, great. Looks like it's working now. I'm Megan Flanagan with the Natural Resources Department and Justin Core with Natural Resources and Engineering. And we're here today. There were some questions raised at a recent commissioner work session about conservation easements and some of the best practices we follow. And so we wanted to come and just bring back to you a little bit a reminder about some of our acquisition strategy, what drives the work we do around land conservation, and answer any questions and share with you around some of the best practices we follow, partly because of our accreditation to hold conservation easements and some of the sideboards that guide that, as well as internal best practices that we have adopted. As you know, our master plan, our Open Lands Master Plan, guides a lot of the work we do around land conservation. And back from 2012 and more recently, just in 2023, we updated the Our Lands, Our Future survey, which was a countywide statistically valid survey around preferences that people had in the community around land conservation and our stewardship activities on lands we own. This is the priority map from our Open Lands Master Plan, and the highlighted shaded bubbles are those priority areas we heard from the community. They want us to focus our land conservation efforts. And there's 12 of them in total, and we partner with a lot of different agencies, the municipalities, land trusts, and others to accomplish quite a bit of work in these areas over time. Just a real quick couple slides from the Our Lands, Our Future survey. This is one that over all the years, even back to the 90s when we were asking a very similar question, we've consistently heard that the community is looking for a balance around conserving lands that provide natural resource protections, conserve ecological resources, and those that provide outdoor access. And that balance is something that we're working on. We hope to bring back to you actually in the next 6 months some policy language around how we'll be defining that balance. What does that balance really look like on the ground? This is from our most recent survey in 2023 again. And at the top of the list, when we ask people how would they like to allocate funds towards land conservation, consistently the top three priorities we've heard are protection of rivers, lakes, wetlands, wildlife habitat, and public outdoor access. So the main ways we here in Larimer County as a county conserve land are with the Natural Resources Department, but also through our community development and planning departments. In natural resources, we're really fortunate to have our open space sales tax, and we use that to leverage grants. We also work a lot with landlords that donate land or do bargain sales, partial donations. But we acquire land through fee simple acquisitions. We do that, in a really strategic way because when we own land and we buy it, it's forever, and the cost to buy land in fee title and manage it forever is much higher than the second way up there, which is conservation easements. Conservation easements are a great tool that allow us to conserve all the values that we hear from the public, sometimes even some degree of public access, but generally that's not a value we're looking for. And that comes at about half the cost to acquire a conservation easement and a fraction of the cost to manage those conservation easements perpetually. We also acquire trail easements and then work closely with the community development department through development reviews. We review those for trail easements, setbacks, ways to buffer our conserved lands in the county. We help inform conservation developments and rural land use projects as well, are great ways that the county has been very successful in conserving lands. So with that, I'll turn it over to Justin to talk a little bit more about conservation easements, which they represent about half the lands we've conserved to date in our county open space portfolio.
All right. Thank you, Megan. Justin Core, Senior Land Agent. Wearing my natural resources hat this afternoon for this discussion, which I oftentimes am with presentations to you all. So yeah, I wanted to just touch on conservation easements at a high level and just talk about conservation easements, how we use those as a tool in our open space program. Because they are probably the most complicated of those various types of property acquisitions that the open space program employs to conserve important lands. So the definition, the high-level definition of a conservation easement is that it's a legal agreement between a landowner and a land trust or government agency that permanently limits use of the land to protect its conservation values. And one thing I wanted to just note quickly before we get kind of into more of the details is that it's important to recognize that conservation easements are voluntary. So we're very fortunate to work with great landowners that share the objectives with the Natural Resources Department and the Open Lands Program to conserve these private lands that have a wealth of public benefits that benefit all of us. So it's always worth recognizing that the landowners play an important role, of course, in all this, because these conservation easements don't happen without those folks. So in terms of the protection of conservation values and, doing so in perpetuity, to meet kind of the Internal Revenue Code's definition of conservation purpose, one of basically 4 conservation values has to be met. So this is kind of a wider variety of conservation values that we seek to protect in our conservation easements, but from a tax perspective, a conservation easement has to protect a relatively natural habitat for fish or wildlife, has to protect a scenic viewshed, meaning a landscape that can be seen from a public viewpoint or a viewpoint that's accessible by the public, protection of open space, which includes agricultural lands, and a protection of some sort of recreational access for the public. As Megan mentioned, most of the time with our private land conservation easements, that's not one of the purposes that's met. We typically meet multiples of the others, though, and those are kind of the different examples of the conservation values, which are really the public benefits that are associated with conservation easements and why there are tax benefits both at the state and federal level available to conservation easement donors. So to protect those values, we tailor each conservation easement to meet the needs of that landowner. So with each one of these projects, we're trying to balance flexibility with protection of the conservation values and, and thinking about how we're going to do that forever. And what makes each conservation easement different is kind of how we define what uses are restricted or prohibited and what specific rights a landowner wants to reserve in the conservation easement. And these are just a few examples of kind of the typical restricted uses and reserve rights that we have in our conservation easements. So we typically either prohibit or limit subdivision or land division. Commercial and industrial development is prohibited. We prohibit or limit the removal of vegetation on properties, especially as it relates to natural habitat for wildlife. Typical reserve rights are grazing or, continuing to use a property for agricultural purposes, hunting and fishing, and the ability for a landowner to add improvements to a property. And we typically do that through the delineation of building envelopes within a conservation easement. Oh, sorry. I'm following 2 different presentations here. One's got my notes, and then Megan's controlling the slides. So the 3 ways that we acquire conservation easements are through donations, partial donation or a bargain sale, which is where a landowner sells a conservation easement interest to the county for less than its fair market value, and they can use that difference as a basis for obtaining or seeking tax benefits. So in those cases, there's some level of cash and tax benefits that would be available to a landowner. And then we've also fully funded conservation easement acquisitions. So that's where the county would just go in and pay that full fair market value to acquire the conservation easement. And I kind of mentioned earlier the guardrails around conservation easements that really come from the federal tax code, but are also followed by the state and the State Division of Conservation. And so to meet kind of that criteria to be a qualified conservation contribution, a conservation easement has to be a qualified real property interest, meaning it's a a restriction that's granted in perpetuity on the property. The easement has to go to a qualified organization, a governmental unit or land trust. Megan mentioned our certification. So for a landowner to qualify for Colorado state income tax credits, their conservation easement donation has to be made to a organization that's certified by the Division of Conservation. So that's a certification that we have and we renew every year. And then the easement has to be for conservation purposes. So those are the four purposes that I mentioned earlier that the conservation easement has to meet. Protection of at least one of those values. So in terms of conservation easement best practices, kind of in terms of how we get these set up and written, there's a number of things that we are guided by and that we seek to achieve in terms of how these are written and put together. Probably the most important one on this list is the third bullet point on the slide, which relates to the appraised value. So for a conservation easement, we rely on qualified appraisers to determine the fair market value. So that's a requirement for any landowner that wants to seek state income tax credits for a donation or a federal tax income tax deduction. But being that conservation easements are quite difficult to appraise, there's a limited number of appraisers that do these conservation easement valuations, and we would rely on that valuation for any acquisition, even if it was one we were paying for or funding, and not, even if they weren't, the landowner was not seeking tax benefits, we would still rely on that appraisal to make sure we're paying what's fair for that conservation easement interest. So with each of these projects, in terms of negotiations with landowners, we keep confidentiality until there's a signed contract in place. Our conservation easement language follows best practices. So there's, guidelines from the State Division of Conservation. There's the Land Trust Alliance. Our CE language also meets the Great Outdoors Colorado requirements. So a lot of our funded conservation easements are supported with Great Outdoors Colorado grants, and our language is very similar and certainly compatible with the state's language that comes through Great Outdoors Colorado. To ensure that existing conservation values are protected, we do a number of things. This is a pretty short list. Again, it varies for every project and every different type of property and landowner and how they want to use their property. But the things that we typically always touch on that are consistent across all of our conservation easements are, again, limiting land division. We require approval for a lot of different things in conservation easements, so reserve rights that a landowner might have, such as building a road or maybe putting some sort of improvement that's outside of a building envelope that might be allowed. We want to have an approval authority role in that process to, again, make sure that things aren't negatively impacting conservation values. I mentioned the building envelopes. So when we set conservation easements up, we look at where to place those to have the least impact on conservation values. So for protecting scenic values, we want to make sure we put the building envelope in a place that protects those scenic viewshed values. For habitat, we want to make sure we're putting envelopes in places that wouldn't impact wildlife habitat, things of that nature. Also size and kind of what's allowed in each one of those. And we also prohibit the conversion of natural habitat for other uses. Again, that protection of a relatively natural wildlife habitat is one of those conservation purposes So if we set up a conservation easement that has that defined as one of the purposes, we have to be careful about making sure we don't allow uses in the future that could impact that purpose of the conservation easement. And then for water, we tie water when we can, if a landowner has water rights, to conservation easements to protect the conservation values associated with the property. The most clear relationship between water and land is protecting irrigated agriculture. But we also, include language in our conservation easements that allows some flexibility for water rights to be used to protect other things like ecological values or to support in-stream flows. And then for each conservation easement, again, another way that we maintain some flexibility, since conservation easements are in perpetuity, is that we develop a management plan for each conservation easement. And that's done at the inception of the conservation easement. So usually either before or within the first year of the conservation easement being in place, we develop that management plan with the landowner. And then, if practices change over time, that land management plan can be updated, and we avoid a situation where we're amending the conservation easement, which we typically don't do unless there are errors or things that need to be corrected. And so finally, so all of what I've kind of talked about so far is what leads up to a conservation easement being in place. So it's certainly a lot of work to get to that point, but it's really the beginning of the long-term relationship with the county as the conservation easement holder. And so our responsibility as the holder is to monitor the conservation easement. So we do that annually. And that's to ensure that all the terms of the conservation easement are being upheld and that the conservation values are being protected. So we create a baseline documentation report at the very beginning of the project. That's basically a snapshot of the property when the conservation easement is conveyed. The property is monitored annually, and we would adjust or make changes to that land management plan as needed over time. But it is a long-term relationship that folks enter with the county when we do these conservation easements, and it really is a great partnership with those landowners.
Okay, and then we just wanted to bring back this metric you've seen. I think it's one of the metrics our department reports on around lands conserved, that second one down. And from a baseline in 2018 of having conserved 50,000 acres with partners that year, our goal by the end of 2043, when our open space tax expires, is to add 24,000 more acres conserved. And conservation easements are a really big part of us achieving that goal. And that's, again, because the cost to conserve those lands and steward them is much less than acquiring lands in fee title. And you've asked us this a few last times that we've come, so we want to make sure we hit on where we're at today towards that goal. So since 2018, we've added about 7,600 acres, and we're about a third of the way into meeting that goal in about a quarter of the number of years. So we're well on track, and we hope to stay on track into the next few years. And with that, we'd love to answer any questions.
Thank you all very much. I wonder, Leslie, your thoughts on how to proceed since it's
Yes,
almost 2:30.
We've had such a good conversation so far around multiple topics. So one option is you're coming back in 2 weeks, right, to do an update on Chimney Hollow. So we could carry the questions over and answer. And if you have questions that you'd like to email in between now and then, or just hold them for 2 weeks so we could continue the conversation until then. Sorry that we ran out of time today. I think Rebecca's update is also something that could be emailed to you as well, so it's very brief. And then we may do some other quick, timely announcements, if that's okay, just so you don't have to wait on those. We could also stick around a little bit longer if you want to, too. I don't know what your schedule is, but if you want to carry on for 5 or 10 minutes, that's another option. So
Thank you for providing a couple of options. My opinion is that we should hold over. I mean, I have a few questions But maybe we could continue this conversation in 2 weeks, when you all come back. What, are you folks okay with that? So that's how we'll proceed,
Okay,
and we can send questions to you via email or some way.
yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, very quickly, if that's all right.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rebecca Everett, Community Development Director. I have just one note related to your 3 o'clock land use hearing today that I wanted to mention. The topic that is kind of in question or at issue for your hearing today relates to water supply and water adequacy within the Northern Colorado Water Association service area. We anticipate that as a result of whatever the outcome is of the conversation today at your land use hearing, there may be a need for some additional policy conversation about this topic. And so we have tentatively reserved some time on the December 23rd work session, CPIR work session, to have that conversation if that timing works and if that's needed. So I just wanted to let you know that we do anticipate that potentially requiring some additional policy discussion beyond the specific case that's before you this afternoon.
Thank you, Rebecca. And in the packet that we received, the need for a deeper, perhaps broader policy discussion based on the outcome of this afternoon would be necessary. So appreciate reinforcing that. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about for this afternoon at 3 o'clock?
No, staff will provide a presentation that provides some additional kind of context and policy background that relates to that issue as well.
Thank you. Leslie, is there anything you'd like to share?
No, thank you.
Oh. Then I believe our business is done at 2:32 p.m. We are adjourned. Not too bad.